Right, that should be recording. There we go. Right, hello and welcome back to the Solar Shed for another hashtag Solar Chat. And today, this evening, we've got Simon Smith from SA Energy, or from LinkedIn, as some of you may know him from. If you know Simon from LinkedIn, then you'll know that he's a genius. And I know that because it says so on his profile. And Simon is a bit of a genius when it comes to heating and renewable technologies. He's one of those people who's just fills his head with knowledge, and he's got a lot of experience. And he's come over today, staying with me overnight, because we've got a job on tomorrow. And I thought we'd have a little chat. So hello, Simon.
Hello, Kevin.
And Fareham, Portsmouth?
Yep, Fareham, Portsmouth, Southampton area.
And you're up here in Norfolk today?
I am indeed. Beautiful, sunny Norfolk.
It has been nice, actually, hasn't it? It has been nice. Today. It has been nice. So, first of all, what have you been doing in Norfolk, first of all?
So, today I came up to do a pre-install survey, have a discussion with the client for an off-grid installation for an archaeological dig site.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, we're going to give them power during the summer months when they're up here working.
Yeah.
So, they don't have to use the generator up there all the time, which is obviously horrible to have running in the background.
Yeah.
And give them some resilience and hopefully open up the window of usage for the site as well for other activities.
So what's that? Is that with solar? What other technologies? Solar and battery?
At the moment, it's going to be a solar and battery thing. It's a charitable concern, so it's got to be done in stages because funds are what they are.
So so is it going to go in and then you're going to grow it?
Yeah, so over time, we'll be adding in a hot water system for the showers that are on site. But the initial remit of the job, if you will, is to give them power. So we're having a small 16 panel array. Yeah. And then it should be a Solintag inverter with their battery system on the back end. And we're hoping to get somewhere in the region of about 40 to 48 kilowatt hours of storage in there.
Nice.
See how much we can wedge into the budget for them, really. It's really just about maximising the amount of money they've got available.
With that new battery we were talking about, you can get 60 odd kilowatt hours in a nice little... Was it cooler? It's the same size as the fridge, but a damn sight cooler. That's going to be our new strap line for the battery. Smaller than a fridge and a damn sight cooler. And it is quite a good battery. I like this is a new battery that's been introduced by some of the guys in the Solar Nation, and they're distributing it to the members, and Simon will have it as well. And the battery itself is, they've removed the chemical or whatever it is, which is the electrolyte, the liquid electrolyte, and they've replaced that with ceramic, and which is inflammable or non-flammable. Non-flammable. So we've got a battery, a lithium battery that we believe can't catch fire. Lithium cells themselves can't they? Or the lithium it can.
So you get a thermal runaway.
Yeah.
So effectively, if the chemical breaches the sort of membrane layer in the center, so it normally happens through piercing, but it can also happen if the battery overcharges, gets too hot.
So because this hasn't got the liquid, that can't happen. So it's reduced the risk of thermal runaway.
Effectively.
Because on the video for it, the promotional video, they're showing firing a dart through it, cutting up the cell.
Yeah, absolutely,
Very, very safe battery.
Yeah, you really would have to go to town. I think what you would need to use is a traditional lithium battery next to it to be able to set fire to it.
Right, and that's not going to happen.
That's never
That's not going to happen.
No.
Okay, so technology's getting better, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But also, with that particular battery, and we were talking about off-grid a minute ago, but also, solar nowadays is about resilience. And you know what? I mean, you've been around this game a long, long time. Similar to me, when we started, it was all about the oil wars, and people wanted it was thermal solar and heating technology to get rid of oil and gas. Then when the feed-in tariff started, we were still at war in the Middle East, but then things changed. It went to a financially motivated purchase.
Yes.
But then in recent years, we've had what's the Greta effect.
Yeah.
In fact, I can even remember in 2008, when the Beijing Olympics was on, and all the talk was about pollution in Beijing. So we were talking about using this technology to stop pollution.
Yeah.
Then it was to make money. And then the Greta effect, sort of 2019, 2020, it was a lot of environmentalists really driving the younger generation.
Yeah, and I think it has been this sort of, my kids, their generation really, that have really embrace this idea that that climate change is actually real.
But then in the last 2 years, the biggest driver within the industry, and we've seen it definitely in solar. I mean, we had a 100% increase. We doubled overnight. We doubled for 2 years. We doubled our best year. And we're back down this year to where we should be, what we set up for. But for those 2 years, it was manic. I mean, it was brilliant. It was, as a person, as a business, great. It was financially really good. It was, secure for life and all the rest of it. But it was manic. And that was because people were, the energy prices were going up. But that was as a result of what was going on in Ukraine.
Absolutely, yeah.
But now the conversation is changing. Within the politics of energy, and what people are now talking about a nuclear war. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. Technically, are we at war because we're giving up weapons to them? I mean, are all these other countries at war because they're giving weapons to the Russians to fire into another sovereign nation? I don't know.
Above my pay grade.
It is. It's above all our pay grade. But we are seen as a solution again to ease people's concerns. And this time, people are now concerned about real energy shocks, not price-wise, but resilience, about grid stability, about where are we going to get our energy from?
Yeah, so this has been an ongoing problem for quite a few years, and the concerns about grid failure or grid blackouts, really rolling blackouts, it's not an unknown concept. I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember them when they happened last time.
In the 70s.
In the 70s.
I was told about them. But apparently, my mum tells a story when she was around all my aunties, which is what mums do.
The gin's been going.
Good God. Not when the gin's on, please. The stories then. Right, no, she tells a story that during the 70s, when I was about 4 or 5, she found me with a carrier bag, putting it over the plug during the day.
Okay.
And when she asked me what I was doing, I was saving the electricity for later on when it was going to go off that night.
You see, now this is the very early time of use tariffs. It was a great idea, just poorly executed.
But do you know what? It was because you couldn't collect energy. But now look, that could actually be an inductive charging pad. And I could put my phone on there and that could charge.
Yeah.
How does that work? How? It's like electricity. It's like Tesla come up, not that Elon Musk Tesla, the proper Tesla. He done something. I mean,
yeah, you can transfer power across effectively an air gap using what's called inductive coupling.
So taking that a little bit further, so as you know, this is a very old fisherman's shed, and they used to process the fish from the tidal river on the Great Ouse. The guy used to have a boat moored out in the river, out in the river there, and it was moored with a 14-foot pole. And when the tidal wave, we have a tidal wave, when the tidal wave comes down the river, he'd drop his nets and all the fish would come to him.
Yeah.
And they'd bring it in here and they'd process it. Now, we own 80 metres of tidal river.
Lovely.
So I've got what's called ancient landing rights. Now, it means I'm allowed to harvest the natural resources of the watercourse for the property. It doesn't say fishing, although that's what it means.
Yeah.
So my interpretation is generate energy.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about having a boat out there, or a raft with a wheel on it.
Okay.
Now, the idea is actually developed recently because last week I wrote a letter to the Port Authority in Kings Lynn and to the Environment Agency because I think it would be a good idea, not just for me to have one, but we could stream a whole flotilla of them all the way along for 12 miles on the tidal river. Just a little platform sitting on top. Now, at the deepest point, it never gets below 3 foot. It comes up 28 foot and goes down to 3.
Okay.
A little cylindrical turbine underneath to collect the tide, and then a little wind turbine on top, because it's always windy on water.
Okay.
We could generate God knows what, and no impactment at all on land. On the relief channel, the other side, which is about 120 metres wide, 12 miles long, we could get 89 megawatts of solar between Kings Lynn and Downham Market without touching the land.
Lovely.
So I've got that idea. But going back to a smaller scale, let's say I put a raft out there on the other side of the house. The river is there. Then you've got the riverbank and then you've got the house. There's about 6 or 7 meters. So first of all, if that technology can beam electricity, and some people say that the Egyptians used to do this.
I left my tinfoil hat in
Some people say the Egyptians, the ancient civilization. You've got to look, there's pyramids all over the world. And how did these people travel around? And all those hieroglyphics looking like aliens. Don't tell me these things never existed. Well, but that's another story.
Apparently in the river, in the seas now, we've heard about this lately. So
well, So the idea of beaming electricity, it physically can happen.
You could do. I think once you get up to those sorts of distances, you wouldn't do it like that. So when you're talking about the little pad that you're sitting the
phone
onto, or even the drive-up systems that are now being put up there for the cars.
Yes,
they're very, very close coupled. The distances make it more difficult. So the further away you are, the less.
So how are the Chinese going to beam solar power from space? Because that's one of the talking points at the moment, isn't it? Putting solar panels up there.
I don't think that will be electricity generation. I think that will be directed light. So
that's like a baddie in a Bond movie.
It very much is, yeah. So you could theoretically do it with a system of mirrors. If you think about the one, there's a system out in one of the deserts. I can't remember what it is, to be honest, but it's basically a big old assault tower.
Yes, I know, in Mojave Desert, and they've got one in Seville as well, in Spain.
Okay, so they use the system of parabolic mirrors along the bottom to heat the top, which then creates a pillar of basically molten salt, and you can extract the steam, from that and steam.
I have seen that. The other one I was thinking of in Seville in Spain, it's like a massive, great big plastic greenhouse.
Okay.
And it's got a funnel. So if you imagine this sheet, twice the size of Wembley, and it comes up and it's got 3 turbines in it.
Okay.
And it's about 6 foot off of the air. It's open up underneath.
Right.
So all the cold air comes in.
It's using convection to drive the turbine.
And heats up. Yeah. And that drives the turbines naturally.
Okay.
But because it's on a salt rock, it absorbs all of that energy and all that heat.
Yeah.
And then it releases it over night time, and they get about 25% of the energy generation just from the heat rising from the soil.
Absolutely brilliant.
Passive energy generation.
So what we're going to do is pop to Sainsbury's tomorrow
and buy a load of salt,
supermarkets
and a load of cling film.
We've got this nailed.
But what I was thinking for the river, right? What I was thinking for the river out here, if I've got my raft, my float, and I'm generating electricity, I could beam it into my house because my house is so close. Now I do have a problem because if we breach the riverbank, England doesn't have any Weetabix because the fens would flood.
Right.
So that is the tidal water. Although we're 12 miles inland, that is holding the North Sea out of East Anglia, which is where we grow food. Okay, so don't say, "Oh, it's only East Anglia." It's where we grow food. So I can't dig through. Now it's also a public footpath between the bit that I own and the house, which I do own.
Yep.
There's a bit about 2.5 meters wide, which is a public footpath and horses. And you know that closing scene in that film Kingsman, when all their heads explode? I just had a vision of when Rob walking his dog in the morning, going through there. If the tides change and I'm generating a load of electricity, so I've got to get the electricity in somehow, but I can't bridge it because it's a public footpath and I can't tunnel through. So I've got to be able to beam it and maybe have a signal system or stop it from beaming electricity if people come along. But it's going to be done. I mean, it's been 20 years of thinking about.
Yeah, so I don't think you're going to get the kind of system that you're looking for using what is effectively 2 windings, magnetic windings that pass that electricity between them, because that's basically all it's doing.
I'm going to have to transfer it, aren't I?
It's going to have to go into a cable that is transmitted, that is across that path in some way.
I'm going to have to work with the Environment Agency.
You're going to need a big old pole.
I'm going to have yes.
And then just shove it across as if it was a power line. That's what I would do. And I would have the system mounted to the pole so you could lower it in and out of the water as and when the tides come in. So you're not affecting the water.
No, there's I've got certain restrictions.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I've got certain restrictions. It's got to be, if it's floating, I can do anything.
Okay.
And if it's fixed, it's got to be of a temporary nature.
Okay.
If I have a compound, I've got to give unfettered access to the land management committee. So at the time, it's the Environment Agency that used to be the Water Authority and all the rest of it. If it's a boat, I don't. So I'm allowed to moor a boat. So it's a matter of bringing that boat, the cable in, and it would have to go through the riverbank, or we could go over the wall. That's one to think about, but that's something I think would be really good. We've got a 500 years old, so it was here before electricity was discovered.
Yep.
It's gone through peat, coal, wood, gas, oil. It's now got electricity and solar electricity.
Yeah. Yeah, you've used every medium possible. So all we got to do now is wait for hydrogen and get you on that.
That's another story. But we were having a conversation earlier, and it was about heating and the different technologies in heating. And Simon had a really, really good way of explaining about the heat demand in houses and about heat loss. So let's just have a little recap on that. We're talking about air source heat pumps and whether a house is heat pump ready and how it's sized. And we were talking about a good company will go in and they'll charge a survey fee to go and do what's called a heat loss calculation. Some of them will update an energy performance certificate as well. I always find them quite beneficial because that's like a shopping list for the house of things to do, even if they're not really accurate. And I know a lot of people really moan about EPCs, but I genuinely think there is a lot of merit for a homeowner who wants to learn a little bit about decarbonisation.
You have to have a level playing field for measuring anything. So if we're going to rate something, it all needs to be rated from the same place.
Yes.
You have to accept there's going to be a margin of error in there, but so long as the error is the same across the board, it doesn't really matter. It's going to give you a fairly good guide.
But the heat loss calculation, that's quite important to determine
so your heat loss calculation has got an awful lot more to do with the fabric of the building. So what we're going to be looking at there is, what are the walls made of? What are the floors made of? What are your insulation levels? What are your windows like? All that sort of stuff.
Do you check all insulation levels, or is it determinable or not?
We try to. I mean, obviously, we can't, without being destructive, we can't check what's in a cavity wall.
This is what I'm going to say. There are some ways, because one of the ways that one of our guys does it, or I'm told does it, if he still does, and whether he does recently, I don't know, is if it's indeterminable, take one of the light sockets off. And just see what's going on behind.
That's possible. Sometimes you can see if you've got a meter box that's sunk into the wall.
Yes.
You can often have a quick look through one of those.
Oh, because often in the meter box, you'll often see a lot of the insulation foam coming through, won't you?
Yeah.
Yes,
If it's an older house, it's been retrofitted, you'll often see the drill holes. They've been mortared in around the building.
And these are the things that you look for when you're doing your heat loss. And that'll determine what the size of the heat pump, the size of the radiators.
To some degree, yeah. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, so you've got this, 3-bedroom box. What's the amount of energy that it's going to lose at a specific design temperature, and therefore we can determine how much energy we've got to put in order to maintain X number of degrees above the external temperature. So hot goes to cold. The house naturally wants to cool. Everything wants to go cold in the universe. So we're combating that by.
But they can be quite. And obviously, a lot of it is in the skill of the installation about getting the flow rates and making sure it's sized correctly and the insulation levels are good and all the rest of it. And as long as people understand, if they haven't got a really well insulated house, as long as they understand it's going to cost them a little bit more to heat it.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's not an issue, is it?
Yeah. So you have to manage the expectation of the client. So if you go to a customer and their house has, got rubbish old single glazed windows and no insulation and stuff, you're going to have to encourage them really to improve on that. I think it's folly to not do that. One of the problems that will happen is if you don't do that before you put the heat pump in, so you go along and it works out, I don't know, you need a 16 kilowatt heat pump to keep up with this lossy old building. And then they go, okay, brilliant, thanks, let's get that done. You get it all done, and a year down the line, they've saved up their beans and they can go and get the windows done.
Yeah.
Now your heat loss changes massively, and your heat pump is now oversized for the building, because now they've solved one of the biggest problems they've got.
Do you know, it's such a simple way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this is why, for me, from a sales and survey point of view, I've got these little mantras that I use, and it's insulate, insulate before you generate, reduce before you produce. Because it tackles the low-hanging fruit, and people can save a lot of money by spending a very small amount, which is why I like the EPCs. Radiator foil, draft excluder, all that sort of stuff first.
So there's some super low-hanging fruit that's really obvious on most homes. If you stick your head up in the loft and there's a biscuit-thin piece of insulation between the beams, get your insulation done. It's going to save you a huge amount of money no matter what you do with the heating system. Just get it done. If your windows are old and leaking, it's quite obvious.
Over the years, sorry to interrupt, but over the years, I've come across a lot of people, usually early retirement, who know what the price of insulation is because they've seen the rolls of it at Wickes.
Yep.
But they're retired managers, not engineers, and they ain't getting up in lofts.
Yep.
So they call someone in, and it's going to cost them 1,500 quid, £2,000, but they know the material's only going to cost 300 quid.
Yep.
And they know it's only going to take half a day to do.
Okay. But what is it you're actually paying for? hopefully.
Well, they're
what
just
you're paying
seeing, these
for.
people are just seeing the price of a £69
Yeah.
roll of insulation.
The problem is, if you go as a layman and pop into your local DIY specialist shop and you pick up your little roll of insulation or two, and you go home and you stuff the rafters full of it, and you close up your roof, and it's lovely and tight and airtight, it's really nice up there and well insulated.
How's the air going to flow?
Exactly. And then you find out that actually the reason why you're paying a specialist installer is
so they don't
know
stuff it down at the eave.
Yeah.
So another thing I found on lofts, when we visit a lot of lofts in this game, is I noticed that directly above a loft hatch that has got no insulation on it is the only place where I'll find osmosis, dry rot, or watermarks. And it's because the hot air goes straight up the stairs, hits the loft hatch, and goes straight up where there's no insulation, and that will then condense. And that can cause problems long term.
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, whenever you're looking at improving older buildings and raising insulation, there's a number of things you have to think about. But the main one is ventilation. Constant
ventilation. Whereas we found it in our house. We put the double glazed in, they're all vented. But what we've found the biggest change in ours is since the open fire. I mean, the house was built with holes in the wall to burn things. It was built like that. But and I love that open fire.
Everybody loves a fire.
But 70% of the heat up the chimney, 30% in the room.
Yeah.
Now it's about 80-20, even possibly more efficient with these new burners. Yeah. And we've sealed the chimney.
Okay.
Now, we're both smokers.
Yep.
And we also eat lots of onions and lots of garlic, and the smells no longer disappear. And also, since we've gone organic and processed free this year, we've found that we're using a lot more spices.
Yep.
And I'm loving the flavors and tastes. And the smells, but they linger longer. They will
linger.
And that is one of the things. It is the ventilation is so important. One of the things I noticed on windows, I go to a lot of people's houses this time of year, and you might see little tiny water beads on the inside at the bottom of the glass. Have a good look. If you see that, have a good look at your windows and have a look at the spacer bar in between the panes of glass. Don't worry about how wide it is. Look at the spacer bar. If the spacer bar is above where the plastic from the windows is, just there, it's bridging a gap. And what you're doing, you're bringing that cold air in and it's condensing. Nowadays, windows are made with a silicon spacer bar and they're recessed below the window frame. So it'll be down here if the window's coming up like that. And there's little tiny things like that that might save you another £10, £15 per window per year, or maybe not that much. But that's the sort of heat loss and the comfort levels, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just the heat loss, but also when we are talking about things like condensation, you've got to consider mold growth. So there is also a health implication in making sure that the installation standard is good.
Yep.
So exactly as you said, if you're the bar between the glass panes, I know there's a proper name for it, but it's gone out of my head what it is. If that is above, then yes, you are bridging the gap
space bar.
So that's bridging that. You are bringing.
It doesn't matter if it's argon filled or not.
That makes no difference.
Because
you've got that solid section there. That's your joint.
Well, those when they were made of aluminium.
Yeah.
And usually that's where the date of when they're manufactured is on there as well. So you can check how old your windows are by looking at that. And sometimes you don't need to replace all of your windows. You can call up, like locally, I work with a guy called Phil from Enhance. He comes out and he does a window doctor job. And it's all repairs and replacements and things like that. Sometimes you can actually keep your original frames and it's much cheaper just to get things serviced as well. And also this time of year, it's a good idea, talking about heat loss, go around with a candle. Get a candle and just walk slowly in front of your windows and doors and just see where the drafts are coming from. And then you might want to adjust your windows accordingly there as well.
Yeah, one of the little downy soft feathers will do.
So listen, we're talking about a little bit energy saving and other bits and pieces about houses, but also we're talking about resilience. Off-grid is all about resilience. I mean, I've got a little box over there, which is my little off-grid system. But nowadays, and this is one of the things that we're going to be talking about on all of the Solar Nation members' social media soon, because we have been given... It's not totally exclusive access to this particular product, but to the system, it is.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
So we've got a system. I'm calling it the Home Guard because you are the Home Guard in the climate war. And it's a very, very special piece of kit. So basically, it's a solar system and a battery system with bells on. All right. So the way I've been explaining to people, correct me if I'm wrong, we've got a central inverter, which converts the direct current into alternating current and controls where the energy flows into the battery and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So when people are looking at the monitoring, they'll see the solar coming in, they'll see how much energy is going into or out of the grid, how much is coming into or out of the battery, how much is being used in the house.
Yep.
Now that's about as far as most of these central control systems go, isn't
pretty
it?
much.
And they've got a timer so you can control it to tell it to charge up at a cheap rate if you want to use it and things like that. And a lot of these batteries, they come up to about 20 kilowatt hours, don't they, on a lot of these systems that we're using?
Yeah,
you can double them up.
Ones tend to be about
but the
that.
standards, the toys.
You can add to them, but yeah, most will limit out at about 20 kilowatt hours. Yeah.
This central control system, I've only explained 66% of the features. So you've got the grid, the solar, the battery, and the load. You've also got hot water diversion. So instead of having a separate piece of kit, they've got hot water diversion. So when the solar has fed the house and then the battery is full, any excess energy, instead of sending it back to the grid, send it into your hot water cylinder. And then, just as a little extra for those who are really serious preppers, it's got a port on there for a generator. Now, we don't want you using gas or diesel or petrol generators or whatever fuel. We don't want you using them, yeah? We don't want you using them. But this is about resilience. Let's say Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, they weren't as friendly as what some media people would like us to be. And let's say the shit did hit the fan. Yeah. Now, I think, the east coast of England is going to be fairly safe because any nuclear bombs here, all the fallout goes straight over Europe and back over to Siberia. So I don't know if you know.
I'm gone, by the way, because I'm very close to a naval port. So
bye, mate. I don't know if you know, actually, back in the 50s or the 60s, the DVLA was all posted up to Newcastle.
Okay.
And the reason for it was because of the wind and comes in from the southwest. If it was nuked, because that's where a central government database of everybody's details was, all the health records and all the DVLA, all the driving licenses. And that was the first centralised databases.
I did not know that.
So they put it up in Newcastle so that any nuclear fallout would all go straight over. It wouldn't touch anywhere else. They're in the northeast of England.
I feel good that the government thought enough ahead